In 1992, Sunsoft released a game that would later become one of the most sought after. It's remarkable how Mr. Gimmick has gone from a low priority game to one that every serious collector needs for a complete collection. And the prices have skyrocketed. Last time I checked eBay, someone was selling the game for around $10,000. But for those who want to play the game without spending a fortune, there are other options, which I discuss in this video. Gimmick was produced under the direction of Tomomi Sakai, and at his disposal he had a team tasked with creating a game that could compete with the latest that the market had to offer. The idea was to literally push Gimmick to its limit within what the NES system could handle. This meant that special techniques and technology were used to create a visual and musical experience that few had seen before, at least from the perspective of the 8-bit console. And therein lies the problem. The time of the 8-bit system was coming to an end. Publishers and developers looked in another direction, towards the successor, that is, the Super Nintendo. So it goes without saying. It was quite an uphill climb. Marketing and releasing a game on a console that was clearly in decline would prove to be a difficult task. Gimmick was launched in Japan at the beginning of 1992, and there the story of the game could have ended. There were ambitions for a global release, but it would prove to be more difficult than expected. Sunsoft in America simply said no, not interested. Why launch an 8-bit game when the market demands something better and more awesome? That is, games for 16-bit consoles. And reviewers of the time criticized the game. There were those who felt that the level of difficulty was far too high. And rightfully so. Gimmick is basically considered a challenging game. So despite the developers' ambitions to create a modern adventure game, it was unfortunately met with negative criticism. But of all places in the world, there was one that accepted to release Gimmick. And it was Bergsala in Sweden, a distributor responsible for launching Nintendo's products in Scandinavia. Gimmick was renamed Mr. Gimmick. It got a new packaging with a manual that seemed to be exclusively in Swedish. And on the back of the yellow cover you could also read that the game was imported by Bergsala AB, Kungsbacka, Sweden, which underlined that only a small part of the world was exposed to this product. Additionally, only a limited edition of the game was made, which has been a contributing factor to its rarity. So initially there were two versions in circulation, one released in Japan and one in Scandinavia. Much later, Gimmick was ported to the PlayStation, and now the game is being relaunched again, both in digital and physical format. The regular version is expected to land in stores at the end of July, and the collector's edition will arrive later this year, but the digital version can already be downloaded in Nintendo's eShop, and the price is set at $15, but it should also be available for PS4, PC and Xbox. So let's look at the contents of the digital version. Of course, you get the game in its entirety, and there are really no major surprises here. It's Gimmick, nothing more, nothing less. A new feature is that there is an online ranking system. Here you can compete against the whole world to see who can complete the game the fastest. If you're good enough, you may be able to get a high ranking. There is also a list of achievements which increases the replay value. It can be about collecting points or defeating different enemies. A special achievement is to complete all the achievements, so it's actually an extensive project and may require many playthroughs. For those who want to get a historical insight, there is the opportunity to see what the old editions looked like, both the Japanese and Scandinavian. Here are pictures of the covers, the games and the manuals. It feels quite nostalgic. As I mentioned before, there are no major changes to the game, but there are a couple of new features worth mentioning. It is now possible to save and load. In addition, you can rewind if you mess up. Quite useful, especially as many places in the game can be challenging. There are also 3 levels of difficulty: normal mode, serious mode and speedrun mode. Normal mode is relatively forgiving, as you can use the replay function and can save and load. This is not allowed in serious mode, which makes everything significantly more difficult. Finally, we have speedrun mode. This is what you should choose if you want to get a ranking. So overall, I think the difficulty levels can suit many different players. You can challenge yourself based on your own skills. In the game you have to get through a number of levels and defeat bosses. This is a platform game that can be relatively unforgiving. It's my opinion that it lacks an ascending difficulty curve. In other words, it's challenging right from the start. And besides, it can take a while to get used to the control. The green creature you play is called Yumetaro, and his movement patterns can be difficult to handle. Above all, he slides a bit when you land, which means that you can easily fall off, especially when you jump between narrow platforms. But it becomes extra noticeable when running on slopes. Sometimes I lost control completely and had to play through the same place several times until I got used to it. But at the same time, this is part of the game's charm. Nothing is free here. And besides, this is a game that revolves around trial and error. After learning what comes next, it is usually easier to predict what will happen, so it may take many playthroughs before you become really good at Gimmick, unless you have exceptional reaction skills, because this game offers many challenging surprises. So with that said, this is not a full review of the game, but rather a glimpse into a world that came into being 30 years ago. Feel free to subscribe to my channel. I discuss and review new games every week. Have a nice day. See ya!